Hello and welcome everyone to the Trusted Advisor Show. I am your co-host today and I'm joined by Laura, Ryan, and Devin. We are so excited because we have another super exciting show and topic. And one of the things that we're going to tie into what we talked about last week, the last episode, we talked about how to best manage risk for your organization, how to identify those exposures. And so one of the areas we're going to dive deeper into today is talking about now that you have all this information together and you've identified those risks and exposures in your business and you've kind of figured out, okay, here's the priority levels. Here's how we're going to address these. Now the next phase and next step is putting together a plan and a strategy along with your team of obviously your board or your business continuity committee, as well as your trusted advisors. Now you got to get together and talk about, okay, what's the game plan and strategy for this moving forward? Now that we've identified all this, now we've got to start thinking about taking action and what initiatives and plans are we going to put in place to actually make this a successful, business continuity plan and strategy. So Laura, that being said, starting from your perspective, like in your area of expertise, how does this, like when you're sitting down with a client, how does understanding their current situation, like maybe it's a financial situation or a problem, where's that pain? How then do you recommend, all right, we need to sit down, given the circumstances, and we need to talk about a game plan and a strategy. What would be your recommendation for a place for someone to start? If you're a business owner or even a nonprofit organization or any kind of business organization, where would you start?
So the first thing that I always hear is health insurance is too expensive. So that is the driving boat of benefits. That's typically where we start. Well, legally, if you have more than 50 employees, you're required by law to offer insurance. So when we start to look at mitigating risk, right, there's not a whole lot of options when it comes to health insurance. So we have to do it from a unique perspective. We have to think of health insurance different than just the old traditional way of paying a premium, going to the doctor, and paying a copay. So part of it is just health insurance as a whole, since the Affordable Care Act came into play. And the complaints are the same and they're always going to be there. And that's health insurance costs are rising. And it feels like my employees still spend a lot of money when they go to the doctor. So that being the number one risk complaint often doesn't necessarily equal to what the risk of the company has. Mm-hmm. So at its core, that's the problem. However, there are other ways that we can mitigate risk through benefit packages by putting in either products or ideas in order for the employer to feel that their employees are protected, right? They're not going to the doctor and spending $3,000, but also that the employer is feeling like they're getting something out of it for their employees. So just to bring it up to date with COVID-19, one of the very interesting things that has happened is insurance companies are actually reimbursing employers back premium because insurance companies are making so much money right now because people can't go and do elective surgeries. They can't go to their standard checkups. So that in itself should show you that if an insurance company is sending money back to their employers, there's probably risk that on the front end we could mitigate so that employees and employers are not giving all this money to the insurance.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer of basically saying, we need to start looking at things outside of the box to help mitigate risk from our standpoint, because there's different things that we can do to make it look like a more traditional health insurance plan that protects both the employer and the employee.
Yeah. And you know what? The way we're looking at this is now, I want to paint a picture for everyone who's listening or watching today. So imagine you are sitting at your table, your decision-making, business continuity team is sitting there. Your trusted advisors are sitting there. And for example, Laura is one piece of that, right? So you're looking at her expertise is how do we look at our personnel capital because benefits obviously relates to that. And with a business continuity strategy and a plan, that's one piece of it that must be taken into consideration for any business or organization. That's one of the pieces. So, and then Devin and Ryan, in your world, like for example, in the financial world, when you're looking at you guys sitting there at the table and advising or recommending certain things as far as, okay, guys, here's what we need to address. Here's the game plan and the strategy for now that we know the risks, the financial impact areas that we want to address. What's the first step that you recommend or you guys consider when you're sitting there at the table and making the recommendations as far as a plan and a strategy?
So one thing, even before we get into the financial side of things, I'll kind of let Ryan cover that. But before we even talk about that, when you talk about, putting this plan in place, like who are the first people that need to know when something goes wrong in your business? Who are the first people that need to know that a business continuity plan is going into, it's going to enforce? Is it certain clients are dependent on you? Is it vendors? Is it employees? So really getting to know those people and list them out, almost whiteboarding all the different people who are the first people that need to know that something's happened to your business, that there might be a break in service, there might be a break in paying a vendor, whatever it may be, who needs to know and how quickly they need to know. I think it's a critical first step.
Man, that's you know what? You just gave me a thought. And I think this is, obviously we're always thinking about how are we going to add value to our viewers and listeners, right? And you just you came up with the concept or an idea that really sparked my interest here. And maybe Ryan, you could delve deeper into this. How can we use the business continuity plan and strategy that we've developed? Like, let's say, for example, we all collectively helped a client design a phenomenal plan. We're executing things, are like they're experiencing benefits and results from the work that we're doing for them and their team because they're executing. Can we use a business continuity plan? The fact that we have one in place, can we use that as a strategic or competitive advantage in maybe in a marketing perspective or a sales perspective? Like for example, I think if I'm talking to a prospective client and I'm explaining to them, hey, we have a business continuity plan and a strategy to address the very thing that we're talking about right now, or working with us, here's what you get. There's value to that, to having that plan and strategy, right? I mean, how do you guys look at that, Ryan?
Yeah, certainly. So, it's interesting that you brought that up because we don't really, in our world, because we talk a lot about financial impact, we don't really quantify from a financial perspective what value that brings to a business, but there are businesses out there that do. In our world, we help business owners, for example, exit their business efficiently. And so it's interesting. There's a few key factors. Private equity is becoming a huge player in the M&A marketplace, and they're going and buying businesses and gobbling them up. However, private equity firms, for example, don't have any experience in construction. They want it because it could be a profitable business for them, but they're going to look for stuff like this. If you don't have some kind of continuity plan or some kind of contingency, and also if you don't have a strong management team around you, you really serve that devalues your business in a lot of ways. And we can quantify that because, we know what key people can be worth to a business. I think the biggest thing, like where we start with everyone is Fortune 500 companies. And I guess from an employee perspective too, like large companies have these in place. They pay a lot of money to pretty high dollar consultants to put this stuff in place. And they leverage other large institutions. A small to mid-sized business that hasn't done this may be at a competitive disadvantage when you want to attract new talent. Because let's say we have a top level manager we want to bring from a competitor that knows that once the owner leaves, like business will continue on as usual in any event, whether they leave voluntarily or involuntarily or something happens to the business. Some people have those concerns with small businesses. I mean, we deal with that all the time where small family owned businesses have issues with, we can't keep employees because they're not sure what's going to happen 10 years from now. That's something that actually you hear pretty commonly in those conversations. And So we try to do our best job to put strategies in place to kind of mitigate that risk of people having negative thoughts about the future of the business and saying, well, I really like where I work. I love that it's a family owned business, but I know that the minute that the owner sells, passes away, gets, exits from the business in one way, shape, or form, I'm probably going to have to look for a new job because this isn't going to be a place I want to work anymore. So that's all part of this business continuity. And we talked a lot about other risks, but that obviously the exit of a key person is a huge risk. And at the end of the day, it all boils down to when you get to this step of this process, you have a lot of data and you have a lot of opinions in front of you. So now it's time for you to put pen to paper and actually put those strategies and policies in place so that you can execute on them. One of the things that we do is we collect a lot of numbers in our practice for clients. We collect a lot of financial data, and that's great. And once we organize it, it all looks really good. And they're like, wow, I've never seen it in this picture. But now we need to show you what the next step is and what you're going to do with this information. And that's where we get into this: develop your plan, build your strategies. Get it in place, put it in writing. If you haven't taken that step, if you get to the part where you collect all the data and you say, well, I have a pretty good understanding what my risks are, we're good to go. I have insurance, I have all these other things. You're missing probably the most crucial part of this process at that point. And it's going to come back to bite you. It might not be today. It might not be tomorrow. It might be 20 years from now. But ultimately, one of the things we say in our practice when we talk to business owners is, and to individual wealth management clients too, is I want to eliminate the phrase, I wish I would have met you this many years ago. Like, I hate it. It kills me to hear that because, we do bring in a decent amount of revenue fixing problems that could have been solved really inexpensively 10 years ago. And it sucks. There's no other way to say it, for lack of a better term. It sucks. It's not fun to have those conversations. But the good news is no better time to start than the present. So we tell people, if you can do it today, even if you could have done it 20 years ago, if you can do it today and still see some benefit, start now.
No, it's so interesting that you brought that up, because I just got a phone call yesterday from a fantastic client of mine who's like, hey, I need a more specific safety manual and plan for a particular project that I'm working on. And they're like, I was the first phone call they made. They're like, hey, Rob, I know that you would know how to, number one, where would we need to go for this? We're coming to you for guidance and advisement. But the fact that they're thinking about that now proactively as a very small microcosm aspect of their business, but it's all part of an overall bigger plan and a strategy. So from a business continuity standpoint, that little safety plan for that one little project right there might be something you don't think about and just might be like a passing thought. But the fact of the matter is that could have a huge impact. That little plan could have a huge impact on their business in either a positive way or a negative way. So the fact that these plans, putting these things in place, has intrinsic value, whether it's measurable or not. Sometimes it's not easy to measure. You can't measure the effectiveness necessarily of, okay, if I put this safety plan in place, because there's just so many mitigating circumstances and factors that could occur. But the fact of the matter is you can plan for it. You can say, okay, if this scenario happens, let's open up. We're already prepared for this. We have a plan. And that's the whole point of this particular episode today, is having the plan when bad things happen. COVID-19, bad things happen. How many clients do you think, or how many people, businesses, actually planned for this happening? Probably not very many. There's a few, very small percentage.
I feel like the businesses that have planned for something like this have already in the past experienced a risk that they had not mitigated, and they had been burned in the past. Because typically my clients that are more willing to have these conversations to mitigate risk from the forefront have already been burned, or they've already experienced something. So they've already had another time in their career, in their business, where they did not mitigate risk and it impacted them negatively. And so they're always proactive going forward. I think COVID-19 is going to open up the doors to a lot more people who had not experienced this before, recognizing that they really need to put in some sort of plan to mitigate that in the future, because this was definitely world spread versus my, couple of businesses here and there that had something tragic, a accidental death on the job or a cancer employee. And that's just speaking specifically for injury and sickness. But typically it's going to be those employers who've already experienced something that are more open to what can we do to prevent this. And I think the conversation coming out of COVID-19 is no one got away from having to put into place some sort of plan to mitigate risk because everyone was impacted by this.
Well, and that is a great segue to as we're starting to wrap things up. And now listen, I want to put before I get into that, I just want to put in a quick reminder to everybody. If you found like you've got some value here from all this, please consider subscribing, because every single week, our goal, our mission is to continue to put out valuable information to give you the best tips, tools, and strategies to make your business better, and to help you elevate to the next level. And so you're successful. So that's really in our hearts, in our goal, in our mission. And that's why we continue to do, provide this kind of content and put the show out. So guys, as we're wrapping up, final thoughts on this particular episode in game planning. What would be your one piece of advice if a business or organization out there right now is confused or not know, all right, now that I know all this, where do I start? I don't even know where to start. What would you guys recommend as far as this particular step of the business planning or the business continuity planning and strategy stage? Where would you guys start? Ryan, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the first logical place to start is to, from our perspective, like I said, you get a lot of data throughout the course of this process, meaning that you get input and you have strategies, you have policies. A lot of it are things that may even exist. So you might just be adding to an existing plan that you never really thought of this way before. So I think it's just finding a way that you can implement, even if it's just the smallest, slightest change, implement an actionable policy, directive, put the right people in place, start to delegate and do some things that other, business owners are doing. It's just smart business. So continue to do that, take those steps towards perfecting it. This process is, and I would also say, don't get discouraged. There's a lot of people and a lot of information involved. This is a process that occurs over a number of years. And the minute that you finish, the following year, you're probably going to change it. So just keep that in mind. Understand that it's a moving target, and make sure that the policies that need to will stand the test of time.
Yeah. And you know what? You should be changing it from year to year, because things change, just like the environment changes, the economy changes, your business model might change. And then we're going to talk about change in the next 2 episodes. So, and how to go back to your plan and check to see, is this working? Is this plan and strategy even effective at achieving the goals that we're trying to achieve as organizations? So listen, guys, I really appreciate your time. It was great. This is a great episode. Obviously there's more to come. There's more in the future. We're going to talk about the next few stages, how to execute the plan, how to get results, and also how to monitor and see how effective are these plans and strategies that you're executing at the ground troop level. How are they affecting your business? Are they making a positive impact or a negative impact? And then how do you pivot? How do you change on the fly when you need to make a change to better protect your business? So guys, we'll see you next time on the next episode, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Rob.
You bet.
Thanks, Rob.